One. Hi, I'm here with Sue Champion, a friend of mine who is currently living in retirement, semi-retirement in the great northeast of our lovely United States, along with her husband, Chris. Thank you so much for doing this, Sue, and embarking on this little experiment here. Sue is and has been a professional dancer, and I'm going to assume a choreographer also.
Yeah, teacher,
A
teacher and
teacher and
Mhm.
dancing teacher. She is also throughout her life. She's also run her own dance companies. She's toured around the United States with those companies and outside the country, which leads me to the reason that I wanted to chat with Sue. Sue and Chris, her husband, have returned last summer, July 19, 2019, after over 12 years of living in Russia. And Sue and I both became somewhat friends because of probably our shared interests somewhat, or we're kind of political junkies. So with the whole Russian situation and the Russian United States situation, we've had plenty to talk about and comment on each of our social media profiles, but wanted to have her here for a little live discussion about that and about her experiences in Russia and her impressions, both of the Russian Federations and the United States. Thank you, Sue, for being here. Let's start with, you've told me a bit about, you first started going over to Russia for visits and touring with your dance company. That's correct, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you for having me, by the way. Yes, it's really fun. Yeah,
Absolutely.
around 2000, April of 2000, we first hit Russian soil.
And when you before you ever even went to Russia, what were your impressions of Russia? And this is maybe a little bit of context. 2000, Russia is just starting to come out of probably the 1990s in general, but bad economic times at that time. Were you aware of any of that prior to going to Russia? What were your impressions of Russia? What did you think of it before going?
Well, to make a very long story short, having trained as a classical ballet dancer, I always had a very secret love, maybe a love affair with Russia, although it was called the Soviet Union when I was growing up. I was born in 1956, in the middle of the Cold War. I remember in first grade when we had air raid drills, I remember our first grade teacher telling us that we had to hide under our desk because the Russians are going to come and bomb our heads and the desks will save us. And I used to think to myself, as I got older into third, fourth, fifth grade, I used to think to myself, how is it, just the naivety of a child, how is it possible that a nation filled with ballerinas and musicians and poets and writers and actors, and how is a nation like that capable of going and bombing another country? I really started to think on my own how ridiculous this message I was getting from out there somewhere. So my intense curiosity to know what life was like behind the Iron Curtain is what really started to draw me to that nation.
And were you aware of what was going on in Russia in the 90s? Was it primarily through the filter of United States and the Western media lens, or did you already have friends who had been over there? Did you have a bit more of an understanding of the situation at that time?
I was aware of what was going on in some sense of the word. I kind of follow politics and national things going on. I am very concerned about people and their lives in different countries. For we're all important citizens, not just, in certain countries, but everybody's equally important in my mind. And so I knew what was going on. I remember watching when the Russian government in 1991 on December 25th, actually, ironically, American Christmas, when they took down the red communist hammer and sickle flag, and they put up the tricolor, the white, blue, and red new Russian flag.
Mhm.
And I remember our daughter was 2 days old, and I was thinking, oh, that is so cool. Maybe Russia will now be free. And it was kind of like this thing in me where I just really wanted to see what was going on over there. Oh, and by the way, when we lived in Chicago, my husband was teaching school at a private school there, and they had Russian as one of the high school courses for the students. And they had a British guy teaching Russian, and they took a trip with a bunch of high school kids from that school to Leningrad because it was still under the communist system. And how I wanted to go. I was so jealous that I could not go with those students. And when they came back, they were not highly impressed with anything because, you know, what 15-year-old ever is. But it was just like, it was like waves on a lake. They'd go out for a while, then they'd come in. They'd go out and they come in. So every now and then, every few months, every couple of years, I just had this intense desire to make a Russian friend or get over there. I just had to do it. I don't know what to tell you.
How did the decision get made in, I'm assuming the year 2000 or a little bit before, to go, and you first went there on touring with your dance company, correct? And
Right.
what was the name of your dance company?
Kentucky Repertory Dance Theater in Lexington, Kentucky.
Oh, and how did that decision come about to go there with the Kentucky with your dance theater? And fill me in about that.
Well, when my students were about, when I advanced, my oldest students were around 10 years old. I'd been training them for about 6 years at that point in time, 5, 6 years. And I said to them, wouldn't it be cool someday to go to Russia and dance there? Because, you know, Russian school students, they love ballet, and maybe they'll invite us and we'll have a wonderful cultural experience. And the kids said, I remember one little girl saying to me, Sue, that's another one of your crazy ideas. And I said, well, no, let's just think and pray about this, and let's just kind of be thinking about it and blah, blah, blah. Well, then about 2 years, and oh, and I said to them, I think in 4 years, we're going to go to Russia. I think by the time you guys are on point and you're dancing quite well, I think we're going to get there. I had no idea how this was going to happen. It was one of my crazy ideas. Well, then about a year later, a little girl joined one of my other classes, and her father had been going to Russia quite regularly for the last couple of years, building a Christian seminary there. And he said to me, oh, it's easy to go to Russia. Come on, I'll show you what to do, and I'll get the ball rolling. And we'll go to Moscow and St. Petersburg and all over the place, wherever you want. So we started thinking about it. We started raising money and telling everybody we were going to go to Russia, and we raised all our money ourselves. Nobody supported us or gave us some big scholarship. We did not put any money of our own into this trip. We had nothing. Whenever we collected $50 or $100 or $1,000, we put it into a community pot. And I told the girls, I said, look, some of you might have some friends who can give lots of money. Some of you might have friends who can only give $1. It doesn't matter. Nobody's going to know what gets contributed. We're going to go as equal people, equal partners. That's the way it is. I'm very much an egalitarian. And sure enough, boy, within about 9 or 10 months, we raised over $19,000. It was more money than we needed. And we went and danced there for a week, and it really changed our lives forever.
And this is in the year 2000, correct?
Right. That was in April of 2000. Yep.
And how many are you? How big is the dance company? How big is the total group?
We had altogether, counting myself, we had 19 people. About 3 of those were chaperones to help me with all these teenage girls. And it was so cool because there was a little Russian church that hosted us. and none of the people there spoke English, only the pastor. And so what they did was, the first day we got into Moscow, they divided up all these little girls. There were like 14 of them, I think, 12 or 14, between the ages of 10 and 14, 15. And they went twos and threes out into Moscow with these old babushki, which are grannies, Russian granny, elderly ladies,
Mhm.
off into the night. I had no idea if I'd ever see these girls again, because we couldn't speak a word of Russian except spasiba and pожалуйста, which is please and thank you. And I was just like, oh my goodness, if these parents back home knew what I was doing to their kids. But you know what? It was so wonderful. And these grannies, they were afraid at first to have these Americans come and live in their apartments, because they were really embarrassed. They didn't have any money. They had no food in the refrigerators. Well, we secretly gave the pastor money so that these grannies could go out and buy food for our girls. We did not just leave them hanging. They just didn't know that the money came from our American donors. So they said, okay, we'll take them for 2 nights, but that's all. And then they have to go to a hotel. They have to go to a hotel. So we were like, okay, that's all right. We'll find a hotel. We have enough money. We'll stay in a hotel. Well, it was so cool, Harry, because on the evening of the second night, all these grannies called our pastor friend, and every single one of them said, don't tell these little girls to go to hotels. We love them. In fact, we want them to stay forever with us. And he's like, are you kidding me? You don't want them to go to a hotel? No. We love them so much. And they were like, just how grandmas are, baking them cookies and pies and torte and all these Russian foods, and giving them liver and raw fish, and none of the girls complained. We just loved it. And it was like, get off the political bandwagon, folks. It's time to live a real life. People love each other. End of discussion.
That first tour then was just for that week, correct?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
when did you go back next? From our earlier conversation, correct me if I'm wrong. You did several tours back and forth for the next 7
Right.
years or so, back and forth to Russia. When did you head out next? And was it with the dance company, or were you going out there individually?
Well, then I returned by myself in September of 2000 and did some dancing on my own with some Russians there.
Oh.
Then we had a Russian singing group that we had connected with, and we hosted them in the States the next year, and we did a big ballet performance, and I choreographed dances to their music. So they danced live in Russian, and we toured all over central Kentucky and Ohio, and I don't know, some different places. So then in 2002, we went back again with the ballet company. But it's interesting, most of the girls that went on the first tour didn't go on the second tour, because they were high school kids that graduated and went off to college. So I had a whole new group of dancers, and they were actually a little bit better. They were older, more trained. I'd had more time to work with them. My daughter was bigger, my son was bigger, and they did some major dancing there on that tour. So we had a really good time the second time, and lived with babushki also, and danced more. The dancers were there for about 10 days.
Was
And
this
my husband,
also in the Moscow region?
yes, this was just Moscow. We never made it to St. Petersburg, unfortunately, at that time.
Okay.
And so we danced in Moscow, and then my husband and I and our 3 children were with us both times, stayed an extra couple of weeks after the dancers left, lived with Russian families, got to know them intimately and personally, started practicing what meager amount of Russian we knew at the time. It was very
Mm-hmm.
little, just da, interesna, yes, interesting, that's about it.
Uh-huh.
Had a great time.
And so the years go by, and those prior to moving there, what and when you did move there, it was not with the company necessarily. It was just you and your
No,
husband, Chris, correct?
Right. And our
And
daughter, Elizabeth, she was 15.
okay, and you also mentioned earlier when we were talking that you had started along with your entire family, including your daughter and I think your two other kids, correct? You'd
Our
started
son's also.
with your
Hmm.
sons also, you started learning Russian intensely with the family
Right.
back
Right.
here in the States,
Yeah.
correct? Did,
Yeah.
when you and Chris decided to, what inspired you to go there, to move there in 2007? What was there an event that happened, or you just loved it so much from your previous trips?
Well, for myself personally, I felt like it was the culmination of a lifelong dream. I had always hoped and prayed for even just one Russian friend. And here I get plunked down in the middle of 15 million of them.
Mm.
If anybody out there is listening and believes in God, I think he has a tremendous sense of humor.
Uh-huh.
He made me wait for a long time, but boy, I'll tell you, did he throw those Russian friends into my life. And so, we both really agreed that this would be a wonderful opportunity for us, for our children, although our sons stayed in America, but visited and so on and so forth. And it was a wonderful blessing for our daughter because she auditioned for and got into the Bolshoi Ballet Academy in Moscow. So she
Oh.
trained there for almost 3 years and learned Russian, lived in the dorms there, spoke Russian only, read Russian, listened to, she became quite fluent in the language for the time that she was there. And it really advanced her career opportunities in the United States. So it was just a great opportunity for all of us. And it's more than just cultural. It was just a deep, you know, sometimes Americans just don't get the opportunity to even travel overseas, let alone live in a country. And if they do, they maybe only live there for a year, maybe 2 years. Let me tell you, Harry, you need a good decade in a place before you really know what life is like there, before you really understand the ins and outs, before you really have an appreciation for the people, not even just in a cultural or political sense, but how they think, how they move, how they have their very being, and how you can connect at the deepest, most basic levels of life. And when you understand a people group at that level, all the things that you believed in early on from your childhood start to disintegrate around you, and you really start to grow up.
Hmm.
And I really wish that Americans, all Americans, would somehow take the opportunity to go somewhere in the world. It certainly doesn't have to be Russia. That's just my place.
Hmm.
Anywhere. I don't care. I don't care what you've heard about a country. Stop listening to the voices around you and go on your own. If you do not do that, you never really know what life is like overseas. You do not. I'm sorry. You do not know. I'm not speaking to you personally. I'm just saying in general.
You touched on a couple things that you reminded me of. I have always heard, I want to get, I was going to jump into this a little bit later, but in your impressions, in your experiences with Russians as you got to know them and your Russian friends, but traveling, and you mentioned how United States, our country's citizens, and us, we do not travel too much. I have heard that
Right.
Russians are pretty professional travelers,
Oh,
all
yes.
all across the economic spectrum. It's not just rich Russians; it's
Mm-mm.
all across the board. Did you find that
Mm-hmm.
also with them?
Oh, yes. My husband and I spent 12 years teaching English there,
Hmm.
as well as I taught theater arts, acting, pantomime, ballet, jazz, modern, all kind of Pilates. I did everything. But anyway, we mainly taught teenagers at an intermediate and upper intermediate English level.
Hmm.
So I would always ask them, so where have you guys been? Because you want them to talk, and converse with you. How many countries have you been to? There was never a single teenager, and these are kids between the ages of 13 and 17, that hadn't been to at least 3 foreign countries, at least. most of these teens who were very, very middle income, Russia didn't have a middle income population
Mhm.
until about the 2010s. That's when the middle income group of families really started to grow there. They had the communist, higher, uppity folks, and everybody else was poor.
Mhm.
And they were happy, but they were very poor.
Mm.
So then when modern enterprise and business started to grow after Putin, made a bunch of reforms, the middle class really started to burgeon there just tremendously. And that's who all our students were, but they were not wealthy by any means.
Mhm.
The average income was probably around $1,000 a month, and that was a good income.
Mhm.
But Russians have wonderful perks in their culture and their society. Education is very cheap or free. Healthcare is free. They own apartments that were given to them for 9 rubles a month during the communist system. So without exception, every single Russian family today has anywhere from 1 to 4 personal family-owned apartments that they rent out. So they own apartments in big Soviet bloc apartment buildings in Moscow and all the major cities, even the smaller towns, that the Soviet government gave to its citizens during the Soviet eras. So they have these nice little 1, 2, and 3 room apartments that they have, for the most part, renovated now. They're all quite nice, very modern. And other people find them on the different little websites and they rent them for anywhere from $500 to $2,000 a month. So these Russian families rent out grandma and grandpa's old apartments and live in their own apartments and make free income every month.
Mm.
So they're making $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month without having to work. We know Russian guys who don't work at all. They just live off of apartment savings and they travel all over the world. That is a remaining perk of the Soviet system in Russia. And I'm not being political here. I'm
Mhm.
not pushing any agenda.
Mhm.
It's just a fact of life. They have all these apartments and they can move into them and live in them if they want, or they can rent them. And believe me, they do. And it's amazing. And you know what? Right now, during the coronavirus problem,
Mhm.
my personal friends are not working, but they are getting money every month from the apartments they rent to other people. And so it is a safety net for them. It's wonderful. It's amazing.
I had read a bit about those Soviet era apartments and how those remained in the family.
Yeah,
Another thing that you touched on is the lack of debt that apparently
no debt.
Russians experience. And so Americans, we hear $1,000 a month income, we just think, oh, how can you even survive on such a thing? But it's pretty different over there, especially when you're not paying, however
Right,
much in interest to this or that, or your mortgage and that type of situation.
right, right. Definitely, definitely.
So, and I want to just touch on real quick, for those some who, if you just listen to a few minutes of CNN in the past 10 years or 12 years, people might be convinced that it's a dictatorial regime over there in Russia. Russians aren't allowed to do anything. They're trapped in their country. I can imagine people imagine that. Russians can freely. What's the situation? Can Russians freely come and go? Are they living in a dictatorial regime? What is your opinion on that? When you hear that, and you must hear Americans say that, I would assume.
Oh, of course, of course. I mean, it runs the gamut. Even through all of my closest Facebook friends, they have no idea what life is like. So I want to share with you not my opinion, but the facts. The facts are facts, FACTS, are that Russians, in many regards, are freer than Americans, and I will tell you why. As we touched on 2 minutes ago, they do not have any personal debt of any kind, basically.
Mhm.
unless they want to go and buy some big yacht or some big house in the country, which doesn't happen very often. So they are basically, for the most part, debt free. They do not have any medical expenses, nor do they have to pay for any health insurance of any kind. There are no big pharmaceutical competition games going on morning, noon, and night. I could walk into a pharmacy in Moscow, the most expensive city, one of the most expensive cities supposedly in the world, and buy a drug that I need to take, which costs me $150 a month in America, and it costs $1.65 in Moscow. Obviously, factually, I do not need an insurance card to buy that drug. And in fact, I don't even need a prescription. It is bought over the counter. So I can walk into any pharmacy for $1.65 and buy the exact, and I kid you not, because I've been on this drug for 30 years, the exact drug for $1.65 in Moscow, and that goes across the board for everything. Everything is like that. You can go to a doctor's office free, or you can go to a private clinic. We did both. We went to both places depending on services we needed. The biggest medical bill I ever had was $300 for, I had had a mini stroke 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. It landed me in the hospital overnight. I had to see a neurologist and a cardiologist. I had an EKG done, cardiograms, ultrasounds, and an MRI. And I stayed overnight and had homemade food in the hospital in a private room with a private doctor who spoke English, and it cost me $300 American dollars. The whole thing.
And this is just the status of you in Moscow at that time is you're working there under a visa. You don't have any additional insurance, that type of thing.
Well, we did have international health insurance, which we could use if we chose to, but we never needed it basically because we could walk into any clinic or hospital and pay barely nothing. But I wanted to touch a little bit more on the freedom of Russians.
Please.
Russians can freely get educated, move overseas, live overseas, have businesses in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, and villages, wherever they want. Yes, there is some antiquated old red tape with the government. There are lots of documents you have to go through. Mm-hmm. But Putin and his government and the Duma have been trying very hard to get rid of most of that red tape, and they've done quite well. And now that everything is computerized and animated and everything, you can go to any center now in Moscow or any larger city over 20,000 population and walk into any center anywhere and get computerized help in 10 or 20 minutes. It's all free. In Russia, okay, let me make something very, very clear. I don't want to put down my country. I love America for many reasons, but I want to share these differences so that Americans understand. In Russia, there is not a money mentality of any kind. Russians do not help you so that they can make money doing it. Russians help you because you have a need and they can address it. So in fact, all government services are free. You can go anywhere you want and talk to them and get their advice and get the ball rolling for any documentation, any problems you may have. Then if you need specific lawyer help, legal help, of course you have to pay for that. But it's still we had great lawyers in Moscow who helped us set our school up. We opened our own ESL school with the help of a seminary there, but we had to do all the groundwork ourselves. We had the help of Russian lawyers who charged us $30 to $50 an hour. Even if it went over that, that's all they charged us. They helped us with all kinds of documentation, all kinds of visas, and their extra hourly rate was nothing, zero, free. So Americans do not realize or understand that the second big superpower in the world can work and have their being on very little monetary work, okay? Monetary gifts given to them. They don't want them. You don't talk about money in Russia. You talk about getting the task done. That's all.
You reminded me a brief conversation I had with a Russian a Facebook friend, a Russian social media friend, and I had asked her about her experience in the Soviet times and maybe what was the primary or one of the biggest difference that jumps to mind when she thinks of that time, and she said there wasn't envy. She doesn't remember envy at that time. And I'm just connecting that to your, there's no money mentality statement that you were just talking about. Do you think that is a throwback to the Soviet system or the Soviet way of thinking? Or do you think that's just within Russian mentality, as it were, if such a thing can be said?
Well, I'm no expert on Russian history or sociology per se, but I've done a fair amount of reading. I think that just my gut tells me that Russia has always been, until Soviet times anyhow, a totally agrarian nation. And so people always just bartered back and forth, and the community, they have a community mentality. They do not have an individualism mentality in Russia. So, and this communal mentality actually goes back to the Mongol horde, when the Mongolians came over, when Genghis Khan came over and started to populate all of Central Russia is today with his people. He came and, took over all of the Slavic people, the Rus meant people who lived by the waters, okay? They lived along the great water's edge throughout, which they did in America and in Europe as well, because it was the only way you could transport goods back and forth. So he had.
And let's and just put in a little bit of context, and I've just blanked. The Mongols came. That was the 1300s, 1400s. Is that when we're talking?
Yeah, 13 to 1500s, back and forth. There was a lot of fighting, and like I said, I'm no expert on Russian history. I can't tell you. Sure. Others could jump in there, and I don't want to sound like an idiot. But I know for sure that even my modern Russian friends will say it's because of the Mongolians that we have a real tight community mentality in Russia. So you watch my back and I'll watch yours. So regardless of politics, dear American friends, Russians could care less one way or the other. They will take care of themselves and their own. So when you become a trusted member of that Russian community, whether it's in Moscow, whether it's way out in the boondocks in Siberia, in a little village filled with old babushki who have never left their houses, once they love you forever. They will never betray you. And it is a beautiful thing. We do not have it anywhere in the Western world. We have friendship, but that's it. We do not have this bonding. And I'm sorry, you will never understand it until you experience it. You just got to experience it.
And you grew into that after a few years of living there, would you say?
It didn't take a few years, I'll tell you. It took that first trip, like I said earlier, once those grannies fell in love with those little girls staying in those Russian apartments, we went back and got to know those same people. And it was just, they would send us care packages from Russia to America with nothing, you guys. And, it blew us out of the water. When you see people who have nothing giving you the shirts off their backs, It humbles you, I'll tell you.
Leads me into just a standard question. How did Russians receive you generally when you were first going over there in your dance company? Was it pretty
Oh,
open?
they received us wholeheartedly immediately. Um, when you look at a Russian's face at first, if you're on the street, on a bus, in a shop, in the metro, everybody thinks they're mean, rude people because a smile is reserved for those who are closest to you. You do not give a disingenuous smile to everybody and look like an idiot. They think you're the town idiot if you're smiling at everyone. So you do not smile until you have come to love those people. So as we got to know these people, they started to smile more and more and more. And when a Russian starts smiling, they don't stop. Then they start feeding you. They start giving you everything. They give you their chocolates. They give you their animals. Practically give you their children. I mean, it's like, it's ridiculous, kind of. So, so I'll give you some stories. As we were there, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was on a bus and we were stuck in traffic and a lot of the people left the bus. This is in downtown Moscow. It's hot in the summertime. The air conditioning wasn't working on the bus. And there were a few people in the back and 3 or 4 of us ladies in the front. And the ladies were going and talking to the bus driver. And one of the ladies motioned to me. She hadn't heard me talking. And she said, "Go and complain to the bus driver. It's your turn now." And I said, "Oh, I don't think he'll understand me." Because, I'm a little bit, I didn't know how to argue with a bus driver. Get us going. And she goes, "Oh, are you a foreigner?" And I said, "Yeah." I was speaking Russian to her and she could hear my accent.
Hmm.
And the other ladies, whoa, their ears perked up. They're like, "Whoa, she's a foreigner. Where are you from? Where are you from?" And I said, "Ugadaitia, guess." And they said, "You're Ukrainian, right?" And then the other ladies were like, no, 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 she doesn't have a Ukrainian accent. So they started arguing about where I was from, not with me, with each other.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, "No, she's French." Yeah, yes, definitely. She has a French accent when she speaks, definitely. "You're French, aren't you?" "No, you're from the Baltic states. You're from Lithuania, Latvia." And I'm like,
Wow.
"Нет, no, я американка. I'm an American." "You're an American." "She's an American. There's an American on this bus. She's an American." "Oh my gosh, why are you in Russia? Why aren't you in America? Isn't America better?" Oh man, did I have a great conversation with those ladies. And they were hugging me and patting me and kissing me. And they're like, "It's so wonderful to meet you. It's so wonderful. Oh, we're so glad. We're friends now. You're our sister." I'm like, holy tamale. It was so fun.
Oh, wow. That what was the general, it's impossible to generalize, I know, but the general reaction of Russians when they found out you were from America and uh, Russians' thoughts about America? And did they change over, because you were experiencing Russia from 2000, which was almost a zero, almost a starting point in a way,
Right,
um,
right. Was.
through last summer where there were big time changes in Russia for the
Right,
better, as far as I understand.
right.
So
Mhm.
did you see Russians' attitudes towards Americans change during that time? And uh, go into that a little bit.
No, I really didn't because I want everybody to understand that we are throwing so much information from our Western media about other countries throughout the world, and they don't get that same amount of media messaging day in and day out over and over and over again about the West.
Hmm.
I can watch and listen to Russian news programs and talk shows. I used to watch them regularly just to hear what people were saying. And I never, even though I don't understand Russian wholly, but I can get the gist of everything that's going on. I never heard a really bad thing spoken about the United States of America.
Hmm.
from Russian news anchors to their own people.
Hmm.
I never heard a thing. Why is it that America must bad mouth in their media? I'm not talking about good American people. Don't misunderstand me, dear brothers and sisters and gentlemen and ladies out there. But why does our Western media, including Europe in many ways, badmouth other nations so much? And you know, Russians asked me that same question. They said, why do Americans think we are all bad people? And I said, well, let me tell you, people, not all Americans think that way. Some do, but we don't all think that way. Most Americans are just as curious about Russia and knowing what life is like there as you are about us, about you knowing about what our life is like. And I said, I think we need to start at the bottom, at the grassroots, just getting to know each other personally. Leave the political and media world on the side. Don't let it influence you in any highly personal way, and go and make friends with those people.
Hmm.
You know, I've often thought astronauts need to rule our nations because they get along better than anybody else.
All right. Now you touched on the political just a little bit. So I got to ask it, your impression of how Russians view and how Russians experience their government, especially the changes that have happened from 2000, from the time that you've started to intimately know Russia.
Mm-hmm. What do you want to know?
What do Russians think of their government? Do they support it? Do they argue
Well,
it with it? Are they free to argue with it? Because we picture over here where they
yes.
can't say anything bad. So,
No, Russians are very free to argue about their government or talk about it, or they're the thing is, Russian people are basically indifferent to politics. That is a fact. There are some people that love Putin and will die for him. There are other people that hate him and can't stand him. And the majority in the middle is like, I don't care. So long as we are stable and making money and everything is quiet and peaceful around us. That's all. And whatever government is in place, and I'm not going to push any government here, whatever governmental system is in place, Russians are happy if the land is at peace with their neighbors and they have food on the table. End of discussion. But aren't we all like that? Shouldn't we all be like that? Shouldn't we take care of our own before we stick our noses into other people's business?
sounds like a good way to look at things. What was most? I ask you some general question. What did you find most difficult about living in Russia? Was it the language barrier? Was it dealing with different government agencies and figuring out just day-to-day stuff? Or
no, that we rarely had to deal with government agencies. Just American people, forget the government, okay?
Okay.
That we didn't, not you personally,
Yeah.
just out there, whoever's listening, whatever you might be thinking about Russia or India or China or Iran, who cares? Government generally never touches your life, never. We were never touched by it except when we had to go through the documentation to get the school going. And they were never mean. I want to say one thing. Let me say one thing about corruption, because everybody wants to talk about corruption. In 2010, I believe it was, you can look it up on the internet. I'm an old lady and I don't know my facts really well. Look it up. Bloomberg Reports does a worldwide governmental corruption report every year or every 2 years, I don't know. But in one of those years, it was around 2010, 12, somewhere in there, they did a report about worldwide corruption. President Putin had been in power since 2000, so he's 10 or 11, 12 years into his presidency. It's not a reign and it's not a regime, it's a presidency. Freely elected presidency. And Bloomberg specifically stated that Vladimir Putin had successfully eradicated 46% of the corruption in the highest levels in the Russian government.
This is in 2010, they're saying that.
Ish.
Around there. Okay. Okay.
You can, maybe all you experts in the internet can find this.
Okay.
I went through, I read it with my own two eyes, Bloomberg reports, and I think I even posted it on Facebook. So I want to really emphasize the fact that during Putin's presidency, the first 4 years, he fired all of the governors of all the outlying districts throughout Russia who were excessively corrupt. He held elections, local elections for all the people in those districts. These are far-flung districts in Irkutsk and Khabarovsk and throughout Siberia, places I'm not going to name because nobody knows what I'm talking about. Put in all new democratically elected governors who were not corrupt or less corrupt, okay? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So when this Bloomberg report came out, they discovered that corruption had decreased by 46%, putting Russia at the same corruption level as the United States of America in that year. So come on, brothers and sisters across the world. Corruption is corruption is corruption.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to go away. Put it in a bag and throw it in the garbage. Leave it alone, okay? So I don't know what was the hardest thing for us there. It would depend. For me, I think maybe the language, because I am quite conversational, but I like to have very deep discussions with people. And sometimes I just couldn't do that with my Russian friends who didn't know English.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So things had to stay at a little bit more of a superficial level language-wise, excuse me. But in our gut and in our souls, we still loved each other, and it didn't matter. We could laugh it off. Like, I'm sorry, I can't say these words. Okay. But being a little bit older people, I think the last 3 years, the hardest thing was just Moscow grew so much from 2000 to 2020. It basically doubled its population. And so just getting around was so hard. And after sanctions fell from our government on the Russian government, they started upping the security network in Moscow. So whenever there were large celebrations in the center of the city, we had to go through all of the electronic devices and show everything in our purses and things like that. And it just made walking around the city more difficult when there were big celebrations. On an everyday level, it didn't bother us at all. And everything was free. You can go anywhere and do whatever you want. Everything's really cheap. You can go to the greatest museums in Moscow for $8, even $3, even free. A lot of them are free. You don't have to pay for a lot of them. So I never, and the transportation system is remarkable. A bus comes every 5 minutes. It costs 30 cents. You can take a round trip train to St. Petersburg, which is 600 kilometers away. That's about 400 miles. It costs you $15. It's clean, it's beautiful, it's safe. You can drink tea and have biscuits. Like Russia's it's like this cozy, warm, hugging environment. It's not political at all. Get off your political high horses. It is a cozy country led by grannies.
Okay.
It is. It is not a bunch of Russian male soldiers running around with guns or something. Grandma rules the roost.
You know, you touch on it, and it's hard not to go to I to go into the Western lens here. So I'm asking questions that are out of that Western lens.
Right,
If
right,
that lens in that direction is just doesn't make any sense, just tell me.
right.
So, you know,
Okay.
no, they don't even see it that way. But you touched upon, like, you said, you know, Russian grannies run the country. What is I'm curious, and someone else gave me this question too prior to chatting with you. Um, the situation, the status of between male men and women in Russia, and as compared to, because the Soviet system, ostensibly everybody was equal, ostensibly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that is true, and but
Hmm.
currently, what would you say the status is? Sort of take it from there. And feminism, does it exist over there in its what
Forgive
can
me for chuckling. That's a wonderful word in Russia, feminism.
oh, is it? How please expand on that. And I mean, women, do they uh, fully independent? I mean, are they pretty much like Western women, or they have the same opportunities? What's your impression
They
of all that?
they certainly have the same opportunities. Okay, I'll start small and I'll build on that.
Okay.
The majority of doctors in Russia are women. The majority of dentists are women. The grand majority of lawyers are women.
Hmm.
The huge majority of judges are all women.
Is this a result from the communist system? Is this
Yes,
it
yes.
is.
In
Okay.
1918, I'm not pushing the Russian Revolution, everybody. I'm just giving you facts. This is what happened, okay?
Hmm.
Because everybody can twist words, and I'm a
Hmm.
very vocal individual. Whoever was in power, I won't even name anybody, they decided men and women were going to be educated the same. They were going to have the same work opportunities. They would be, of course, allowed to have children, usually two, maybe three. They did not have a cap on it, but they kind of expected women to stop at one or two children so that they could work in the factories and build their nation. The powers that be at the time wanted to take agrarian czarist Russia, not saying anything against the czars, I love them as well, czarist Russia, which was primarily 100% agrarian, into the age of science and industry. So they purposely they really worked on developing the infrastructure of a very large piece of land, which is still the largest land mass nation in the world, and started educating everyone. Everybody went to school, everybody. And they had to learn Russian and 3 foreign languages, usually German, French, and maybe, I don't know, Italian, maybe, I don't know, English. I think they learned English, believe it or not. Women were given the vote sometime in 1918, a year or two before American women were given the vote.
Mm-hmm.
They were expected to vote in every single election, whether that was even necessary under their system, but they were expected to vote. Mm-hmm. And you can argue as to whether that was even needed or not, useful or not. And they were expected to become scientists, engineers, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, biologists, research technicians. And they all went into these fields, economists, and they are still in those fields today. Now, do they make the same wage? No, they don't. Some do, but most make 10 to 30% less than men in the same fields. Okay. But they are highly respected. And the viewpoint, and you can ask even young Russian women this, what do you think about feminism? And I'm talking about women 25 to 45. They will say, we already do everything. Why would we want to do all of the men's work as well? Yeah. We don't understand the Western idea of feminism. We've already been doing everything for 80 or 100 years. We work, we go to work all day, every day, we earn our salary, we come home, we take care of our children, we cook, we invent things, we write things, we create things, we educate people, we have a great education. Did you know that the average Russian has 3 university degrees? The average Russian.
I have heard that Russia
Mhm.
leads the world in a number
Yes,
of degrees from university. I
yes,
did
yes,
not know that. I did not know
yeah,
that.
yeah. And the Russian, what is it? The literacy rate is 95%. It's gone down 3%, but it's
Mhm.
still at 95, and Finland's at 98. Finland also has an excellent educational system. We've been there several times.
Mm.
But anyway, so they often, I had a lady who I taught English to for quite a while, and she said, Sue, we're already feminists. We're the original ones. The West is just realizing that.
and
So
and
there you have it. You
so,
know,
the Russians themselves are attributing that to the Soviet system and what came out of that.
definitely they do. They do.
You know, you just I'm gonna like just change a little bit. Have you met expat Russians who live in the United States who's who've maybe lived here a long time, who maybe have a different view of Russia than you do, having lived there in the past 20 years? And is there any irony, perhaps, in that? Sort of take it from there. I think you're nodding. You might know where I'm going with that.
Oh yes, yes. I had somebody working in my ballet school, a Russian ballerina who had emigrated here many years ago, and during the time when Russia was going through the change from the communist system to a more democratic free enterprise system that it truly is today. And she had a very hard life there, but she was from well, actually she was from Samara, which is a large centrally located Russian city on the Volga River. It's a really beautiful city. Never been there though.
Hmm.
But it was difficult. But this is it's so hard to give one answer to a question like this because everybody's experiences are different.
Sure, of course.
We know many Russians because of their faith persuasion, maybe being Jewish or Protestant Christian. I don't know about Orthodox. I can't speak for them.
Hmm.
Left because of certain persecutions at certain times during the development of the communist takeover.
Hmm.
And so they came freely to the United States and have done very well here and have been successful. But, after 20 or 30 or 40 years of living here, can also see that no nation, wherever you emigrate to, is the great utopia.
Mm.
No matter what their political or educational or social structures might be. There's no utopia anywhere on earth. Every nation has to deal with their own internal problems, and they need to really spend time dealing with those problems. So, yeah, I do know people. I know people who came to America and 2 or 3 or 4 years later went back.
Mm.
I know people who okay, I can tell you a very interesting story. I don't know them personally, but I read a book. They're very famous journalists. The father was a journalist for Time magazine, I believe, sent to Moscow in the late 60s, early 70s, and they were there for about 4 or 5 years.
Mm.
They were a very faithful Jewish family,
Hmm.
total Americans, moved to Moscow, and it's Time magazine, I'm quite sure, lived in a neighborhood right next to where we lived there for 5 or 6 years, put their little children in Soviet nursery schools and the entire Soviet system of education. The Soviet Russian people knew that they were Jews.
Hmm.
They did not harass them, maybe because they were Americans, so they wanted to put on a good face. my Americanism now is coming out in me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But they truly seem to love this family and those children. Moscow, the neighborhood where they lived was on the outskirts of Moscow. So there were still little dachas and little wooden huts and houses and little farms. And so all the teachers and parents would share their daily vegetables with these American Jews. And, and they all had great times together and socialized. Well, then eventually the father got reappointed back to the States.
Mm-hmm.
So they moved back, I think, to the Washington, D.C. area. But the children, Harry, were so touched by their Russian upbringing, I'm going to cry, that over the last 30, 40 years, every single one of those children moved back to Russia.
Oh. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Even during the end of the communist era, when Russia was struggling greatly, they all speak Russian fluently.
Mm-hmm.
Two of the older children, I think they're both girls, married Russian guys, and they are journalists and writers in the Moscow region. Another one, I think one of the younger children married a Russian person, and they're in Germany right now, but they're writing stories about Russia. I don't know. And then the youngest one went to university in St. Petersburg or somewhere. They all went back to Russia. So what the family did just about 5 years ago, the parents are older now, they're in their 70s, and the children are all in their 40s, and they have their own kids. They all went back to the same neighborhood and the same high school and elementary school and nursery school where they were raised by the Soviets in the 60s and 70s. And some of the younger teachers were still there, and they remembered them.
Oh, wow.
And they had a huge reunion, and everybody was crying, and they filmed it, and they didn't care if they were Jews. They don't care about that stuff. They just love you if you are genuine. If you genuinely love them, they just genuinely love you back.
You touch on
I
that.
don't know what else to tell you. That's just what I feel. That's what I saw there.
Where there, go into a little bit. Now, you haven't, how much you were able to travel, you and Chris were able to travel around Russia and touch upon, from what I understand to be the pretty tremendous multiculturalism of the country.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a 15% Muslim. A lot of people don't know that. I think around
25%.
25%.
Yes.
Touch on that a little bit. Your travels around the experiences with the different cultures all throughout that country that go back hundreds or thousands of years, even.
Thousands of years. There are approximately 150 to 180 different ethnic groups inside the Russian Federation. This includes countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Armenia, all these different places, which are now free and independent nations, and they have their own governments, but they have close political, social, cultural, and economic ties to Moscow because Moscow supports these small, poor countries. So in Moscow, some of the major ethnic groups in that city are from Uzbekistan mainly, because the Russian government allows Uzbeki citizens to come there, with special visas, special stuff. I don't know. And the documentation is complicated to me. And they take care of the lower end jobs like cleaning the cities and cleaning restaurants and working in restaurants and clubs and this and that. But they make good money in Moscow compared to in Uzbekistan. So they try to bring in as many people legally as they can. They did have a big problem with illegal immigration several years ago, but they've pretty much cleaned that up. I think there's still some leakage here and there, of course, but there aren't major problems with it. Okay, I will specifically address your question concerning the fact that Chris and I had the wonderful opportunity to travel to Kazan, Tatarstan,
Mm.
where
Mhm.
Tatars live. Okay, the Tatar people are a blending of Muslim and Mongolian people. It's confusing. When the Mongol horde came over, Muslims came in and they brought in their Muslim faith, and the Mongols and the Muslims from somewhere all kind of congregated in central Russia.
Mhm.
This became the independent Republic of Tatarstan. So we took a trip there, a long weekend with an English school we'd been working with many years ago, and spent 3 or 4 days in Kazan, which is the capital city. Kazan is, well, it's basically one of the Muslim centers of Russia. But this is what they do. In the 1,000 or 2,000, in the 1,500 years that it has been Muslim, it is also Orthodox Christian, and it is also Orthodox Jew. It is an equal 3 split religious city and country.
Mhm.
Because in the Russian government, they have a special religions department. In the religions department,
Mhm.
any major world religion may freely worship in any way they want, but in Kazan in particular, and in Tatarstan especially, they have a special law. I don't know where it comes from, but it's a law that says if a group of Muslims wishes to build a mosque, they must wait until the Orthodox Christians want to build a temple, a church, a khram, and they have to wait until the Jews want to build a synagogue. So the Muslims wait, and they wait. And then a couple months or years, when all groups have decided they're going to grow their faith,
Mhm.
they all grow it equally together. So there has never, listen to me, there has never in 1,500 years of religious history in that city, there has never been a single religious skirmish of any kind. The Orthodox support the Jewish religion, the Jews support the Muslims support the Jews and the Orthodox, and they blend themselves together as friends. That's all. They have a fellowship that respects each other. Respect. I never saw any inside Russia, any Muslim uprising of any kind. The only thing that happened in Chechnya
Mhm.
many years ago, and I don't understand the details, was that there were extreme rebels that wanted to, I don't know, overthrow the entire Russian government or some stupid thing.
Mhm.
So Putin went down there early in his presidency, very early. He was a young fella, and he sat down and he looked at the Orthodox people and the Russian soldiers and the Muslim people and the Muslim Chechnyan soldiers. And he said, look, in this place, there will be brotherhood or you all die. Because I have the possibility of bringing in the big tanks. So it's up to you, brothers.
Hmm.
You either live together in harmony or you're all dead. End of discussion. That's basically what he told them. And they said, okay, that's it. And it's a lot more complicated than that.
Sure.
But basically, what ended up happening was the Muslim guy, who was the son of the father who had started a bunch of this and that, Putin personally and purposefully appointed him leader of Chechnya.
Mm-hmm.
And he remains leader to this day. And he is a Muslim man. And he said, you can remain leader so long as you maintain peace between the Muslims and the Orthodox Christians. I want no fighting. I want no kidnappings. I want no murders, nothing. You keep the peace, or I come and I end it all. And I
Mm-hmm.
bring my men in.
But from
The
my
end.
Wow. From my base understanding of that, that the more extremist factions will say the equivalent of the Islamic State, that type
Right,
of
right,
that were
right.
in operation in Chechnya at that time. Was there any awareness among the Russians or discussion of what was, we'll call it Western backed, of those groups at that time, or yeah, would go into
I
that?
cannot speak to that. I know nothing about it whatsoever. I
I
don't know.
I understand. I
All,
understand.
all, all I know is that in the 20 years that Putin has been president, there have been no problems whatsoever. And now you can even go to Grozny, you can be an American, you can wear Western clothes. You didn't used to be able to do that.
Mm,
You can be safe on the streets. There are no guns. Oh, I want to, may I address the weapons issue in Russia?
please, please.
Okay.
Are you
Um,
talking, and just to go back, are you sort of comparing it to kind of a
yeah,
United States and guns and how we view guns? Is sort of an
kind
equivalent?
of like that. Yeah.
Okay, please go
So,
on.
okay. So there's a huge amount of fear mongering in our nation right now that if we cannot have an arsenal of guns, whatever size we want,
Mhm.
then the government is not fulfilling or obeying the second commandment, okay?
Second
Which is the
Amendment.
right to bear arms.
Right,
Okay.
right, right,
Okay. So there's a big argument over here in the corner,
right.
okay?
Yep.
Because some Americans don't want to become a police state like Russia. Let me tell you how false that is.
Please, please.
Under Russian law, any Russian may own a gun freely. However, they can only own certain guns.
Okay.
They cannot own hand pistols of any kind. They can own rifles for hunting. It is
Hmm.
completely allowed.
Hmm.
However, they have to go through several weeks and several levels of gun ownership training, psychological evaluation, and life evaluation. How you have all your friends are interviewed, your co-workers, your bosses. Are you mentally and emotionally stable? Blah, 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 blah. And if all the answers are yes, then you can have a gun. You really cannot store it in your own house. You have to keep it in a place where you go and get it. It is locked up. You go, you take it hunting, you bring it back on the specified time when you are supposed to have it back.
Hmm.
You put it there, it is locked safely away, and you go home. Now, what kind of society has this created for Russians? In Moscow, living there for 12 and a half years, a city of 15 to 18 million people with 150 different ethnic and religious groups represented, not a single policeman carries a gun. Not one.
Had no idea about that.
And that is a fact, America. They do not carry guns. They carry billy clubs.
Hmm.
And they have things that they can talk. If they needed a high up guy to come with a gun, then they can get somebody to some place quickly. But no policeman ever carries a gun. Okay, now we have in Moscow, we have wonderful big celebrations, as I had alluded to earlier, especially Din Pobyeды, Day of Victory, where we celebrate the Soviet Red Army's victory over the Nazi government and took Berlin. The Russian people took Berlin. So we celebrate that every year.
Hmm.
And the last few years, we've been doing this big march where everybody and his brother from anywhere, even foreigners, anybody can join. It's completely free, you guys. Russia's completely free. You go to a certain place in downtown Moscow on their main street, and you walk down the street with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of other people.
And it really is that many people.
It is that many people. Chris and I walked it the first year. There were 2.5 million people marching that day.
Mhm.
We were in the middle of that march.
Mm.
President Putin was about 30 minutes ahead of us, but we could not get to him. And we all start from one end of the city and we march to the other end of the city. It's about 5 to 7 miles. We didn't go all the way to Red Square because we got really tired, but we marched for most of it,
Mhm.
holding signs of our dear relatives that we lost in World War II.
Oh.
There's not a single Russian family that does not have somebody that died in that war.
Mhm.
Okay, now, 2 million people marching. It took about 6 or 7 hours for that march to be completed on the streets of downtown Moscow. There was not a single scuffle, not a single fight, not a single uprising, nothing. Because Russians are free of the fear of gun violence.
Hmm.
They do not have to fear if somebody in that crowd is going to suddenly start shooting someone. The police force does not have to fear that if some guy has a gun, they're going to have to shoot him.
Hmm.
There's no fear from the citizenry that, oh my gosh, who's going to be out there? What gangs? What street gangs? There are no street gangs, by the way. There are no inner city gangs because there's no inner city. Rich people, middle people, poor people, street people, we all live together in Moscow.
Mhm.
You can go anywhere you want, to any neighborhood and visit your friends. There's no inner city, you guys. Nothing. It is such an amazing shock in your face. Because in America, you expect this violence. You expect people to maybe at least get into a scuffle or a fight. You expect somebody to disagree with somebody else. You expect somebody to maybe have some kind of weapon, even a knife. You don't even see that in Moscow. Nothing.
Mhm.
And so I honestly, for 12 and a half years, as an elderly woman, I never felt scared. That's not to say there's no crime in Russia. Sure, there's crime somewhere,
Sure.
but I never saw it. I never saw it or felt it. That's what I'm talking about when I said, I feel that at the core root, the Russian people are freer than Americans. We are sometimes scared to leave our houses in our neighborhoods for fear of what will happen to us in the larger cities, of course.
Mhm. Mhm. You know, there's so many different subject matters within everything you're talking about, but we've already been talking
Yeah.
for over an hour now. I want to wrap it up for now because,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
I
need
would,
to eat lunch.
oh yeah, that too. But I would encourage anybody who might be watching this, just look up videos or newscasts of the Victory Day March in Moscow or
Right.
anywhere in
Right.
Russia. It's an amazing sight. Just a video of it, you can
Right.
get an idea of
And the march is called the Eternal March.
the Eternal March. It's called.
Right.
Yeah.
Meaning that our brothers and sisters who lost their lives are remembered eternally and will live on eternally in our hearts and souls and so on and so forth. And I want to tell you, walking with all those Russian people who have been through so much, every few minutes we started shouting, "Ura!" which means hooray, which means victory, victory to the people who overcame Nazism. Ura! And it would just start from a grassroots swelling. It would start small. And pretty soon, everybody in the entire march was just saying this at the top of their lungs. For the first time in my life, I felt united to a people.
Oh, wow.
I had never felt that in my own country. We are always arguing and bickering about everything. People, put down your emotional weapons and start loving each other.
On that, that's an excellent. I'm a let's wrap it up right here. I can't thank you enough, Sue, for chatting about this. I'm gonna tag everybody I know with this and forward it on. Let me ask you one slight political American viewpoint kind of thing. The media in Russia, is it all run by Putin, and does he have an iron-fisted control over all of Russian media? What is your response on that?
That's so ridiculous. You know, that's the 007 mentality Americans have. Everything is Hollywoodized.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I was teaching English to a bunch of young Russian journalists who worked for Kommersant,
Okay.
which is the oldest newspaper in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Kommersant was the #1 communist journal along with Pravda and Izvestia. I asked those journalists point blank, America wants to know, are you allowed to say anything against Putin, or does he hand feed you everything you have to write? And they chuckled and they said, well, no, Putin's never even been here. But the guy who owns Kommersant is a good friend of his. When he has meetings with us, he just says, be polite. You can criticize Putin all you want, but be polite when you do it, because he's a close friend of mine. But you may write whatever you want. I'm not going to fire you.
Just be nice about it.
Just be nice about it. And I thought, that's the way it should be. End of discussion.
Interesting.
So
Interesting. And that's that one particular publication, correct?
That is the largest, oldest, most, you get Kommersant. When you fly on Aeroflot, they give you Kommersant. It is the newspaper of all of the stock exchange, all of the minerals, all of the trading, the economy, industry, finances. It's like the Wall Street Journal of Russia. That's Kommersant.
Okay.
It's like Bloomberg Reports, The Economist, and Wall Street Journal rolled into one. It was a powerful experience working in their building, let me tell you. Woo!
Wait, and I'd also heard British MP George Galloway had talking about
Scottish.
Yeah, Scottish. I'm very good, thank you, and he'd appreciate that distinction too. Talking about the media in Venezuela, for instance, and now the general impression is it's run by the state and Maduro and all that, but actually the vast majority of it is giving a Western viewpoint. How did you find that Western viewpoint that we're familiar with, was that pushed in Russian media at all? Did you see that in Russian media? Or
no, because you only see that if it's journalism written by Westerners. You don't see that in Russian journalism. Now people might say, oh, that's because it's all propagandized. But look, there are two sides to every coin. Maybe then if everything is propagandized in Russia, maybe it's also so in America. Why do Americans automatically assume that everything we speak, write, and talk about is truth and everybody else is wrong? Why do we assume that? Why do we assume automatically that we are the only exceptional nation? We are not an exceptional nation. We are a nation with strengths and weaknesses. We need to humble ourselves as people and look at our own faults and fix those first. And not just automatically assume, why do we have such a paranoia syndrome? Why is everybody out to get us? And so therefore we have to go and conquer everyone. It is the most immature, ridiculous way of looking at the world that anybody could ever come up with.
On that note, that is a perfect button on this whole thing. Sue, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the recording here in just a bit, but I want you to hang around after that and just or do our own personal goodbyes. But thank you so much for going into
You're welcome.
So much appreciated. And please,
if anybody's interested, let's do it again, folks.
Absolutely. Give my best to Chris for me. All right.
I sure will.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, Harry. Take care.
Thank you.
See you on
Sue.
Facebook.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.